relating to 2022.
Okay, thank you, Lewis. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, obviously in a consultant or a professor's position, where are we looking? If we go back, it was mentioned this morning that September the 11th. September the 11th, we lost 1% of the available seat kilometers during the year of that disaster. In 2020, we lost 70% of the available seat kilometers. So you can't compare, obviously, where we've come from. We can only hope, and as you say, what might 2022 look like? In October, the start of October, we'd recovered here in Europe to about 70% of 2019's capacity. Now that's obviously what the seats would be. Load factor is about 20 to 30 percentage points below capacity. So on the supply side, it's looking quite good. On the demand side, there's work to be done, and I'm sure that will be part of the next questions. So I think the optimism has been pushed by airlines putting supply back. And there is a vision by 2022, we should have around 80% in Europe recovered on seat capacity. Asia is obviously the market that is least in relation to the globe. But in Europe, there seems to be very strong optimism. The capacity will be there. What airlines now, tourism boards will be pushing for is how to generate demand. And that's something that we know, one thing is supply, but it's the demand which needs to come back fast as well.
Okay, thank you. Now coming back here to Patrick. Gavin, we come to see a growth of connectivity as a precursor for growth in international tourism, and even before COVID-19, aviation and tourism were witnessing tremendous success. Tell a little bit, how did airlines and airports support route development pre-COVID? What has worked? What are the learnings? What can work again, or what need to be changed?
Good question. I think air services pre-COVID, I think airports had the bargaining power. Aviation was growing. IATA said around 7% in 2019, and predictions were that the aviation would grow around 5% after 2019 for the next 10 years. Obviously, the manufacturers, Airbus and Boeing, were turning out more and more aircraft. Airlines were taking new orders, and airports were able to determine on capacity constraints in certain markets. This is who we want. These are the airlines we're looking for. Are you ready to come into our destination? So I would say, with bargaining power, airports held the story. What they could do, and what you have in the airport world is that they can reduce their costs. So you could give fee waivers to an airline. You can say, okay, my landing charges are X, now they're Y. We can give you a volume deal for the amount of passengers that you can bring, and Rodrigo would be putting that together, and airlines would accept or not. And maybe tourism boards pre-COVID were a little bit seen the afterthought. So let's make a deal and see if there's any money. COVID has changed that. I mean, I would now say who's got the bargaining power? It's the airlines. Why? Because airlines have realized that their hardware, their aircraft, can be picked up and moved quite quickly. So in the pandemic, one of the fastest growing airports in the world was Bosiman Airport in the Yosemite National Park, because all of a sudden Americans could travel domestically. All of the big American carriers were not focusing on Chicago, Los Angeles, or Atlanta, and they put everything into the middle of nowhere. And not like hotels that can't move their hotel from one building to another. Airlines have been able to say now, who wants our business? And so I think airlines are holding the power because they're experimenting. We've seen a huge amount of experimental routes, and Patrick's mentioned the work that Lufthansa has done here with looking at the Azores as an opportunity. May not have happened, but other than the pandemic. But I think the learning I've been saying for many years is aviation and tourism, it's two sides of the same coin. And this pandemic has really put the importance on tourism boards. They need to be at the table. Not at the table when the deal's been made between an airline and an airport, but actually to put the vision forward and convince the airline that it's trust and it's reliability. You know, I've been lucky. I've sat on both sides of the table. I've worked with tourism boards, I've worked for an airline, and I've negotiated for airports. And in the olden days, it was, yes, how much money do you have? That would be the first question from an airline. Today, it's not that question. It's, how do we work together to support demand? Where's the demand going to come from? You know, you can write what we call a revenue guarantee. You can pay my losses. Now, in Europe, that's not so easy to do because of the European Union and state aid, but the thought process was, look, you fly, this is what you can bring me. If not, we'll pay the difference. No, that's not what the airline is now saying. What the airline wants is reassurance with the tourism together that we can support this. And then at the end of the day, the airport, and sorry, Rodrigo, but the airport is just the point that somebody arrives. Tourism creates demand, and the airlines work with tourism to support that. And I think that's where the pandemic has put tourism back at the table, really at the table, and can make a huge difference, and not just rely on airlines and airports getting together, creating a deal, and then hoping that somebody can help it. Because that's a short term, and that was what was happening because the capacity was just being pushed. Now we need to work demand. And I think that's where I would say the next phase of air services is airlines can make the decision, and tourism are there to help, and airports, the role then is, of course, to support that process, but it's more about triangulation and not 2 and 1, as I think what it was pre-COVID.
Thank you, Gavin. So going for the last question, which is more general, and although Gavin gave a partial response, but now from each of your business.
About, from the Portugal perspective, the ecosystem, I think, you know, we have the conditions. I mean, it was interesting this morning, we've had both from the two different sides of the government, one about the national airline and what role that will play, and one from the Secretary talking about the importance of aviation. So, you know, it's a very topical subject within the country, and I think if you look in the last, as I mentioned, about capacity, you know, we've seen Ryanair increase 3 new planes into Lisbon Airport for this winter. We've seen EasyJet with a seasonal base now going to 4 flights for next summer. Wizz Air, which is the other large low-cost airline, has just launched a flight this morning into Porto. You know, so I think the ecosystem on the aviation is working. Obviously, what Patrick and the Lufthansa Group and all of the work now with Eurowings growing significantly into Madeira, opening up bases in Stockholm. You know, from the point of view of if you talk about low costs or legacy, I think, you know, we've got the conditions, and as was said, why is Ryanair interested in Portugal? Because it's a great destination. It's not just that, it's the fact that there is huge potential, and that's why Ryanair wants to be here, and as many airlines as we need to be here. So I think the conditions are there, the incentives are there, the challenges obviously with the infrastructure, that was also brought up this morning, and whether or not the airport will come live and all of those discussions. But I think on the periphery side, on what's happening in Algarve, what's going to happen in Madeira, what's happening in the north, you know, there are airlines taking these opportunities. They're being experimental. They see great opportunities in Porto, so let's go in there. Great opportunities in the Algarve, let's build that. And I think, you know, that's got to be good. And of course, the more that's supported, and, you know, we've been hearing that, I think, you know, we've got it in place. And of course, we're going to have the Hotel Association conference next month. They've got a panel about aviation. So, you know, aviation is talked, I think, more in Portugal than many other countries. You know, it's like the national team. Everybody knows the strategy of aviation for the country. But it's topical, and that's good to have, that people want the country to have a good industry of aviation. And as I've said, and I will leave, aviation and tourism, they are the same side of the coin.
So, wrapping this up, I think, thank you very much, all my 4 panelists. Thank you for your optimism, also for believing in 2022. I think it can be, from my point, and I work more in the hotel side, we see a lot of interest in Portugal, a lot of funds coming, wanting to buy hotels. If I would have 20 hotels on the Avenida da Liberdade to sell, I would sell them. So the interest in Portugal is here. We need airlines, we need the infrastructure, we need the operators to bring them home. And of course, I think it's the same in Brazil, where of course you have a very strong domestic travel, and good that it's coming. But there is a way also to do, and I think a positive way, to bring more international tourism to Brazil. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.